after studying John Brown and Googling this site, I can't believe I'm actually finally here. This is the Kennedy Farm right here. This is the Kennedy Farm where John Brown and 23 of his raiders hid out while they were preparing their attack on Harpers Ferry. John had 3 of his sons with him and his 15-year-old daughter, Annie. She was in charge of the cooking, the cleaning, and keeping it appear that they were normal people living in the home, even though they had 5 African Americans who were hiding here.
So the entire point of coming to Harpers Ferry is there was a federal arsenal as well as an armory. So weapons were built here, stored here, ready for use in the case that the United States were to go to war. John Brown intended to come here, steal all these weapons, and then go into the mountains to continue the bloodletting and the carnage that was leading his personal crusade against slavery.
He was convinced when he raided Harpers Ferry and got all the weapons that slaves would just flock to him like sheep and be part of his militia. They didn't. He truly believed in his mind that he was here to save slaves. He did a lot of things that were not fair, very, in my opinion, terrorist activity. He actually pulled grown men out of their beds and hacked them to death in the middle of the night. And he did this all in the name of God. He was so extreme that even Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman were like, John, you gotta calm down a little bit. We are on the other side of Harpers Ferry, and up here is the old lock house, which is where one of John Brown's men gathered information about the armory right across the river. I'm inside the lock house here right across from Harpers Ferry, and this is where John Brown's man, John Cook, supposedly worked so he could spy across the river onto the armory so they could help make their plan.
And up she rises, way hey, and up she rises early in the morning.
All right, so here at the B&O train station in Harpers Ferry is where the first casualty of John Brown's raid would occur. The mayor was here with his friend Hayward Shepherd, who was a free black man who worked for B&O Railroad, and the first bullet struck Hayward Shepherd, mortally wounding him. The mayor would come back and check on his friend several times, but he would in fact die here on the loading dock at the B&O Railroad station.
Early in the morning.
So here is where the actual armory was, and they've done excavations and they have recovered it up to preserve it. But there's a replica building over here of the firehouse where the John Brown raid actually happened.
All right, so the stone monument to John Brown behind me is the original location of the armory's firehouse. John Brown and his raiders took up residence in the firehouse, fortified it by pushing the fire wagons up against the doors to make it difficult to get in. And this is where the Union forces, essentially the American Army and Marines, as well as local militia, laid siege to John Brown and his raiders over the course of 3 days. John Brown and his men fired from inside of the firehouse at people here in town, and the Marines and the militia fired back at them from various positions around the firehouse. After 3 days, the Marines battered the doors down, went inside, killed a few raiders, and arrested John Brown and the remaining survivors.
So basically, we are in the line of where the fire was, right here.
Shave his belly with a rusty razor, shave his belly with a rusty razor, shave his belly with a rusty razor early in the morning. Way hey, and up she rises, way hey, and up she rises, way hey, and up she rises.
Right here is the replica fort that would have been on the armory.
And up she rises, way hey, and up she rises.
2 of John's sons died during the raid. They say these doors were actually in the engine house that became John Brown's fort.
Way hey, and up she rises early in the morning.
These are actual weapons used by John Brown, including his pike that was found at the old engine house. Before Harper's Ferry, John Brown and his raiders, including his sons, went to Kansas, which is now known as Bleeding, Kansas, and he took this sword and he actually drug 5 men out of their beds and murdered them. And he thought it was okay because he was doing everything in the name of God. He actually used this quote saying that Christ armed Peter. So he felt this sword in his hand was fair to drag men out of their beds unarmed and slaughter them. And this is a guy that people think is a hero. So what happened after the raid at Harper's Ferry? John Brown was taken prisoner and brought to this town, Charlestown, West Virginia. He was held here in prison, and then right here on this site, which is now private property, was where the scaffold was. He was hung here on December 2nd, 1859. And guess who was here watching? John Wilkes Booth and Stonewall Jackson.
Early in the morning, way hey, and up she rises, way hey, and up she rises, way hey, and up she rises early in the morning.
These are actually pieces from the scaffold where John Brown was hung. When I mentioned I was coming to Harper's Ferry to see where John Brown had his famous raid, it's amazing. A lot of people had no idea what I was talking about. Well, it's very interesting. There's tons of books. There's a show that came out recently with Ethan Hawke playing John Brown, and there's an old movie that had Ronald Reagan in it. Go check it out.
After the raid, only 5 of the original 23 raiders escaped with their lives. Essentially, some swam back across the river to escape to Maryland, and the rest of them fled, not to be captured, tried, or convicted of any of their crimes at Harper's Ferry.
I think he was a terrorist. Some people think he was a hero. What do you think?